Good morning. It is 8:03 a.m. on Sunday, July 12th, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Because it is Sunday, I'm continuing my rewatch of Legend of Korra, Book 2, Episode 3, Civil Wars, Part 1. And it is Civil Wars because, of course, we're metaphoring for family troubles. We have three plot lines in this episode as we kind of continue on since Korra and Tenzin split up. First, we have the relatively small scale and comedic one, which is Bolin being mistreated by Eska and Desna, where he is, he is dating. I'm suddenly forgetting which one is Eska and which one is Desna. Eska. He's dating Eska, and we see that they're mistreating him as we expected that they might, based on when he first asked her out. And then there's a moment where they're talking about returning to the North Pole, and he's kind of relieved, like, oh gosh, I'm sure gonna miss you. She's like, oh no, you're coming with us. And this is where he's distraught, and we're mostly getting comedic effect for his inability to break up with her because he is scared of her. We learn later that when he mentions it, she threatens to freeze him in a block of ice and feed him to dolphin piranhas. Which, I think, obviously the plot line is for comedic effect. Rocket, come on. But at the same time, I think that there is actually a level for, on the one hand, in a normal relationship thing, just breaking up with someone being hard, I think Korra and Mako's reactions to Bolin in that context, like if this were a normal situation, yeah, it's kind of like, come on, just do it. Like you're a grown man, you need to be able to handle this sort of thing. But on the other hand, like, she not only has political power, but she's also a skilled bender and has threatened violence. So I think it's maybe worth noting that even though this is a comedic plot line right now, at a certain point, you kind of wonder, it's like, we're playing it for laughs when Bolin brings them to dinner, and then he's like, I didn't know, I'm so bad at reading people. I didn't know she was so scary. Help me, Avatar. Which is, it's fun, and I don't want to make that sound like it's not fun, but, there's also an element of, like, in real life, if you want to break up with someone and they threaten violence, either to you or to themselves, that's not okay. So, in any case. Rocket, what are you doing, buddy? My little dog is just all ornery lately. Rocket, come. Interrupting the walkthrough, but, the rewatch. So there's not otherwise much development in this one. Bolin has not yet successfully broken up with Eska, but that plot line is kind of ticking along in the background. And meanwhile, we can also say, probably include in that plot line the Korra-Mako relationship, where, there's still a little bit of the, he's doing a little bit of the on-the-nose girls, right? They don't know what they want, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to offer advice? I can't figure it out. And that whole tropey thing and whatever. But they're working on it. And mostly at this point, they hope to have a romantic dinner is interrupted by Bolin and the twins. So that's kind of what's going on there. So the second plot line, which we follow in this episode, is with Tenzin, Vacation Tenzin, over at the Air Temple. And we learn first that, Iki has run away after being teased by Jinora and Milo. So we got to go find her, right? But in the meantime, this looking for Iki exposes some of the tensions that Tenzin hasn't talked about with his brother and sister, Kaya and Bumi, and realizing some things that he hadn't thought about in a while and is realizing now that he may be misremembering in ways because they're talking all about vacations and he's like saying, remember some of those trips we went on, and they're like, we didn't go on those trips, that was you and Dad. And we learn over the course of the episode that Kaya and Bumi basically felt that Tenzin was obviously Aang's favorite and got a lot of his attention, and they felt neglected by comparison. I don't know what my dog wants today. Rocket, little buddy. He feels neglected too. I'm being a bad airbender parent. And I think one of the things that I think is worth maybe noting about this is that I think a lot of people, this whole plot line is actually one of the things that a lot of people don't like about this season. In part because I think a lot of people just don't like the idea that Aang, who is such a beloved character from The Last Airbender, could be, gasp, a bad parent. I can understand people's resistance to that. I understand that creates a little bit of a cognitive dissonance because you don't like the idea of thinking of Aang doing anything like that. It doesn't feel good. But I feel like that's part and parcel with having this series trying to be a little bit more mature, is that you have to deal with some of those things. Rocket, what are you doing? No. Rocket, come. Down. I tell you, he is all in a tizzy this morning. Oop. You have to be able to process some of those ideas. And the thing is, too, that I don't think that this is a reflection on trying to have the story say Aang was actually bad. He's a bad person and we don't like him now. That's not what's happening here. The fact is that Aang was in a really tough situation, even, as he grows into an adult. Only airbender. The Avatar, responsible for helping to heal the world. There's basically he's in a situation where you can't please everyone. I'm just going to have to ignore him barking. He can't please everyone. There's no possible way, because on the one hand, we have to say, okay, well, he ended the war, but now that's going to take a long time for those historic divisions to be settled. And the idea of starting a public city and helping the new world be at peace in all of his duties as Avatar, all of those things are complicated, right? And no, he doesn't need anything. He's just being a pest. So he's got all of those important duties. That is a lot for anyone all by itself. But then also raising kids, right? That's a lot for anyone all by itself. And on top of that, he is responsible for hopefully having airbending continue after he's gone. And when only one of his 3 kids is an airbender, that's all the pressure for continuing the legacy of airbending all put on Tenzin, which I think simultaneously means that Aang has to give him more attention just on the basis of doing that. And I think it's also part of why Tenzin is so serious all the time is he has a lot of pressure on him. He is, he is taken on that part of Aang's duty now. And while I think that that doesn't make it okay to neglect Kaya and Bumi, I think at a certain point, you can't do everything, and he did his best, but something had to give, and it seems in this case, Kaya and Bumi didn't get as much attention as they wanted, and it's reasonable for them to feel that way. We could perhaps call it a failing from Aang, but it's a failing amongst many other successes, and it's just a matter of, okay, you can't do everything, so which do you choose? And I don't think necessarily the idea that preserving world peace and also ensuring that airbending continues, right? So I think it's complicated, right? And so I think that it's an interesting story to tell, to have Tenzin really processing some of that for the first time, realizing, gosh, I was the beneficiary of the choices Aang made. And in some respects, because of just all the time spent, it makes sense that he would have been closer with Aang than Kaya and Bumi were, because they spent that much more time together, right? And it makes sense from Aang's perspective. He wants to continue airbending, and so here's Tenzin who can do it, right? He can share that with him, and it makes sense that there would be a closeness there that isn't with the other siblings. But because Tenzin was that sole focus, it shielded him a little bit from understanding how the other two siblings felt. And so, even though we don't resolve that in this one, because mostly they're squabbling, and I find it very realistic the way we have these grown-up siblings squabbling. But processing all of that, I think, is really interesting, even though a lot of people don't like it. People talk, it's like character assassination of Aang, and I'm like, come on, no. Aang was a very sweet little kid who's extremely thoughtful and compassionate, but also sometimes a little flaky and a little prone to do what he wanted in the moment as opposed to what the responsible thing might be. And he grew up having a lot of responsibilities that probably anyone couldn't take on all the time, and everyone in life has to make choices about where they spend their energy, and you can't spend it everywhere that you feel like you should. Anyway. So, I don't know if you hear that. This is Rocket chewing on a cardboard box. Okay, so in the meantime, though, that's left suspended because we're in a two-parter. And then, so let's talk about Korra. And I think that it's unfortunate that there are so many parallel similarities to Korra and Tarlok last season, because that's, I think, what makes it all the more frustrating to see Korra be manipulated in the way that she is here. There's a lot of gaslighting going on from Unalaq, but also I think the thing is, I feel like this is better than that. This is the better version of those two pieces, because with Tarlok, it's even when he was saying things that we sort of feel like, yeah, I guess maybe that's right, but we're immediately suspicious. Whereas in this case, Korra is frankly persuaded because he's making sense, right? He's saying, oh my God, Rocket, no, stop it. It's one that, so they return from their trip, and oh no, now there's Northern Water Tribe forces invading the city, and Korra's concerned about this. It's like, what is going on? And he says, well, people might wish the spirit portal harm, and we have to protect it. That's all they're here for. And also that the behaviors of the Southern Water Tribe are why the spirits were out of balance to begin with. We have to fix that, right? We have to also now travel to the... Rocket, no, come. Come here. Rocket, come. He's driving me crazy today. I tell you, I love him so much, but boy. All right, lovely. Come here. Okay, one moment. Okay. Uh, okay. Yeah, so in any case, he tells her, if you keep working with me, we'll open up the northern portal too, and then people will be able to instantly go back and forth between the North and South Pole. Won't that help our two tribes unite? And that's the Avatar's job. After all, you're supposed to be the spirit between the bridge between the humans and mortals and the spirits, right? You're supposed to help unite the tribes, right? That's your job. I'm telling you how to do that. And yes, it requires making some hard choices, and so we can see how Korra might be swayed by some of that, especially given that she's been learning that her parents and Tenzin weren't always honest with her. And so we can understand some of where she's coming from, but in this episode in particular, she's being forced to try to look past some things that are increasingly alarming. We learn that Varric is spearheading a revolution from some of the Southern Water Tribe people, but at the same time, it's like when we see that meeting, we might say, well, hey, come on, a revolution's might be an overreaction, but he's also kind of saying, like, they've locked down the harbor. Why? And I'm gonna, I've got to sell these fish, right? And so he's talking about, like, they're taking charge, they're ruining everything that we've got going on for bad reasons. And the primary tension, of course, we have in this episode is Korra thinking that maybe her father is involved. And we have some interesting stuff play out with, there's a moment where there's this dispute between some northern soldiers and some southern kids, and she's trying to calm it down without anyone getting hurt. But then there's one of the southern kids throws a snowball at her and basically is accusing her of being the worst Avatar ever because she's not taking their side. And so this is, for the first time, Korra is having to deal with some really tricky stuff as the Avatar that isn't just about, how do you defeat this bad guy, but also, like, sometimes making peace means making both sides unhappy, even the one that you might like more. And that's a tough position to be in, but she doesn't even get a chance to calm that situation down because her dad shows up and does it for her without asking, right? And on the one hand, he does calm the situation with in an authoritative way, but he doesn't, he kind of undermines her, right? He just comes in, he does not even address her first, he just clears it away when she was obviously in the middle of it. So, that's not really great either. It's not very supportive of his daughter, who has a very hard job right now. So we can understand why she kind of storms off. She's mad. She feels like she's had secrets kept from her. And even though she's concerned by some of this stuff going on from the North, it's supposed to be in the service of a good thing. And she's really struggling with all of that. And, in the meantime, there's an attempt to kidnap and theoretically maybe kill Unalaq. And it seems like one of the people wearing a mask might be her dad. And so there's this great fight where she is actually really frustrated because she doesn't want to hurt these people. She understands why they're doing it and she wants them to stop, but she doesn't want to hurt them. And in particular because one might be her father. And there's this moment where she's like, am I going to have to fight my dad? But then it turns out it's not him. And we learn, at the end, it's like, no, he he did refuse to participate. And in fact, some of the other people in the South are angry at him for refusing. And, so now it's, at this point, Korra is, I think, still kind of trying to make it work with both sides here. But then at the end, Unalaq shows up to arrest both her parents anyway, even though we just established. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting, potentially legal question of just like they didn't participate, but they didn't know what was happening, right? Like, did Tarlok know, or excuse me, Tonrak? Did Tonrak know that they were going to try to kidnap Unalaq? Probably not specifically, but it's kind of like if he refused to do it, like, should he have warned them? Like, yeah, that's where this stuff gets, like you could at least understand the rationale from wanting to arrest them. But yeah, in any event, that's kind of where we leave things because it's a two-parter. So we'll leave it there. I'm sorry about all of the rocket interruptions. But that's how it goes sometimes. And I will talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes and next week for Civil Wars Part 2.